Emergency service is dangerous business. When the call comes in, there's an urgency to respond. That's what we're trained for, to get where the help is needed, to do the job, to make the difference. As the lights flash and the sirens blare, the adrenaline pumps, and even longtime veterans feel their pulse race as they make their run to the rescue. It's what the community relies on. We are, after all, the men and women committed to help others escape tragedy. And there's the irony, because too often in the haste and urgency and quest to save lives, emergency responders are themselves involved in accidents that keep them from those calling for help. It's time to develop a different approach to responding, focused on arriving safely to provide the needed service, and in the process, doing no harm. Responding to the call is dangerous business, and nowhere is that danger more evident than at intersections. It's estimated that emergency service vehicles are involved in more than 3,000 intersection accidents every year, resulting in millions of dollars in property losses, injuries, and deaths. And every one of the deaths, every one of the accidents, every one of those injuries tumbles a whole series of consequences that take their toll on the lives of the responders, our organizations, and the people we're intending to serve. In nearly every city and community in the country, there are stories of people confronting the loss and pain that intersection crashes cause. One of these stories involves Donald Reeks, safety officer for the Chesterfield County Fire Department in Chesterfield, Virginia. It also involves his children, Megan and Josh, their mother Lori, and a friend, Bruce. Donald received the first news of the tragedy from his answering machine.
There was a message on the answering machine. There had been a bad accident. I got on the phone, called the hospital, and finally got through to someone who could tell me what was going on, and ended up being a nurse in the critical care unit. And she told me that Megan and Josh, my two youngest children that were in the vehicle, had both been injured. They were both critical. They did not expect them to live. Lori and Bruce were dead. They were killed on scene.
The victims were in a car at an intersection traffic light as an ambulance approached, responding to a call for service.
They were sitting at a stoplight, turning into a 4-lane divided highway. There were 2 lanes that turned left, which was the direction they were going. They were in the far outside lane, so there were cars beside them blocking view of approaching traffic. At the moment it turned green, the person to their left started to pull out and saw the ambulance. But because of the way the cars were situated, Bruce could not see it. It was summer, it was in August, windows were up, of course the air conditioner was on, I'm sure the radio was probably on. The ambulance skid about 114 feet before it entered the intersection. It pushed their car 52 feet into the median strip. It struck between the driver's door and the passenger door. Nothing could have prepared me for that. It was total shock. For at least a week, it was just total shock. I never left their side.
Though Megan and Josh survived the accident, each suffered severe skull and brain injury, require special care, and will never be the same.
I showed the picture of the kids that were taken about a month, 2 months prior to the accident. I tell everybody that it can happen to anyone, and ask them that if they do nothing else, to remember the faces of the kids when they get into their apparatus or car to respond. The one message I would like everybody to understand is that running through intersections without control of that intersection it kills. It maims, and it's unnecessary. It does not have to happen. We have the ability, if we don't do things right, to kill somebody, and that's wrong. That's not our business.
There are lots of explanations for why intersection collisions are so prevalent, but no explanation has ever reversed an accident, healed an injury, or brought a loved one back to life. No explanation will ever make Megan and Josh whole again, or ever return their mother. What we need is a new mindset to kick into gear whenever we approach intersections in emergency vehicles, a keener awareness of what can go wrong. That's what Operation Safe Arrival is all about. We've got to see arriving safely as our #1 priority. Even national standards agree that no other consideration has precedence over getting to the call safely. 3,000 times a year, collisions at intersections keep us from rendering the help we're committed to. So our intention is to change the way we look at intersections, change the way we think about intersections, and change the culture to reestablish arriving safely as the #1 priority. Operation Safe Arrival is based on a very simple premise. If we change nothing, then nothing will change.
If we know that intersection accidents are on the increase, we know there's a high percentage of those crashes that are occurring because we're not being safe.
When intersection accidents occur, the injuries and loss of life inevitably lead to the outcry, who was at fault? And the legal system sets itself upon the task of determining who is responsible. But let's make a point now and make it clearly. If you're driving an emergency vehicle involved in an intersection accident and someone dies, that individual is going to be dead whether it's your fault or the other driver's fault. And that's nothing any of us wants to be part of. The truth is, there's nothing we can do to guarantee the proper behavior of other drivers. But if we apply ourselves to a few important principles, if we commit ourselves to doing no harm, there is at least the possibility that intersection crashes might be reduced. One important key involves doing our best to make sure that the drivers of other vehicles recognize the path and intention of the emergency vehicles we operate. We call this the perception of presence. Okay, let's take a closer look at the perception of presence idea. There are at least 4 major factors to be considered: warning devices, other drivers' actions, safer intersection practices, and the laws of physics. We begin our examination of the perception of presence with a review of warning devices. Now, everyone accepts that responding to a true emergency requires the use of all audible and visual warning devices. That's a given. But you have to accept this as well. No flashing light, no wailing siren, no blaring horn has ever stopped another vehicle.
We jump in those vehicles and we flip on the sirens and the lights, and immediately we're invincible. Nothing can harm us, and everybody must be able to see us because we have sirens on and we have these flashing lights on our vehicle. Those do not stop an accident from happening.
There's always the possibility that other drivers may not be able to spot where the emergency vehicle is coming from. There can be drivers who are hearing impaired or distracted by mobile phones or loud music, or driving cars that are heavily soundproofed. Keep this in mind. Warning devices don't prevent accidents. Reactions to warning devices prevent accidents. The concept of the perception of presence recognizes that nothing we do can give us control or ownership of intersections, but we can heighten our awareness of how other drivers are reacting to our warnings and make the attempt to respond safely. Think of it this way: your lights and sirens are only a request for the right-of-way. As much as we might prefer it otherwise, lights and sirens don't ensure the right-of-way.
If you come up to a red light, the sirens don't get you through there. The lights don't get you through there. They simply warn the drivers, and then you have to get permission. And it's not a verbal permission, it's an eye contact, it's by action. You know, people come to a stop at that intersection, they recognize the presence of that apparatus, and then that apparatus is able to proceed through there.
Now, we all understand that motor vehicle laws typically allow emergency vehicles that are running lights and sirens to exceed posted speed limits, move against the traffic flow, and proceed through stop signs, red lights, and other control devices. And that these exemptions to the law are ordinarily prefaced with some conditions stated as the law of due regard. But there are a number of concerns with the concept of due regard. not the least of which is that it's subject to very broad legal interpretation, and its application can vary widely from case to case. As an emergency vehicle driver, you need to keep in mind that the law of due regard is the legal check and balance for permitting you exemptions to laws that others must abide by. Operation Safe Arrival believes that emergency service providers should accept the limitations of warning devices. They're great tools, but they certainly can't guarantee clear passage through intersections. Stay aware, stay defensive, do no harm, and arrive safely to answer the call. That's the kind of change that may well reduce the number of intersection crashes and save lives. In discussing the limitations of warning devices, we included situations that might keep other drivers from pulling over and giving way for emergency vehicles. If warning devices aren't seen or heard, for whatever reasons, they're just not going to be effective. It really doesn't matter if other drivers can't see or hear your warnings or simply choose to ignore them. The results are the same. Operation Safe Arrival is promoting safety, your own safety, and the public's safety. And that includes recognizing that there are drivers out there who don't drive cautiously. Be on the lookout for them. Drive carefully and defensively, and do what you can to keep other drivers' mistakes from involving you in a collision. That's the kind of culture and change that'll save lives. There are two elements at the heart of emergency service personnel. One, we're committed to saving lives. And two, we often exercise that commitment with acts of heroism to protect our partners and the people of the communities we serve. The goal of Operation Safe Arrival is to save lives. What's needed is a new respect for the dangers posed by moving emergency vehicles through traffic, particularly through intersections. With that in mind, we've developed 8 simple guidelines that can reduce the number and severity of intersection crashes. We call the guidelines the 8 signs of intersection safety. You won't see them posted along the side of the road as you approach intersections, but you should know them and abide by them just the same. Here are the 8 signs of intersection safety. Number 1, don't rely on warning devices to clear traffic. No warning device has yet been invented that actually stops traffic. The second intersection safety sign, scan intersections for possible hazards. That includes right turn on red signals, pedestrians, and speeding vehicles, among others. Number 3, begin to slow down well before reaching the intersection and cover the brake pedal with your foot, and always scan in all 4 directions: left, right, front, and back. The fourth sign of intersection safety, change the siren cadence not less than 200 feet from the intersection. Number 5, scan the intersection for all possible passing options. That could mean passing on the right, passing on the left, or just waiting until the traffic clears. And always, always avoid using the opposing lane of traffic if at all possible. The 6th sign of intersection safety, consider coming to a complete stop, particularly when you're unable to account for all lanes of traffic. Number 7, use your head by using your eyes. Establish eye contact with other vehicle drivers, and get your partner to help by communicating when all is clear and by reconfirming that all other vehicles have stopped. And finally, number 8, always proceed at intersections 1 lane of traffic at a time. Approach each lane as a separate intersection. VFIS offers these 8 signs of intersection safety to implement, supplement, or enhance emergency vehicle response policies, and they're all under a few general headlines, like do no harm and take the time to be safe. A little extra time invested in arriving safely may well reduce the incidence of crashes. That will benefit you, your organizations, and the communities you serve. Intersection safety, doing no harm, and taking the time to be safe will help us do the job we're committed to do. We will save lives. Operation Safe Arrival is focused on change. changing our reliance on the effectiveness of warning devices, changing the way we respond to erratic or irrational actions of other drivers, and changing our practices to make every intersection crossing safer. But there's one thing that Operation Safe Arrival absolutely cannot change, and that's the laws of physics. When impact occurs, there's going to be damage. Consider this piece of apparatus, roughly 30 tons. That's an enormous amount of weight to manage safely. If you're trying to guide this behemoth at 25 miles an hour and suddenly face the necessity to stop quickly, the laws of physics will not bend. When you mix the inflexibility of physics with poor judgment by the driver, the consequences might well mean impact, injury, and maybe death. Let's go through a couple of examples of very common and dangerous situations. Let's begin with not accounting for all lanes of traffic. We've created this artificial setting so that mistakes we dramatize can be limited to a virtual world. This will allow us to study each of the elements of the incident independently and in detail. That's not a luxury enjoyed in real-world circumstance. This is a fairly typical intersection. Market Street runs east and west. Memory Lane runs north and south. There's a gas station here, a landscaped mound on this corner, another gas station here, and a convenience store on the final corner. We'll begin this demonstration with a relatively lightweight emergency vehicle, say an ambulance, traveling west on Market Street in the center lane of traffic, a lane marked as a straight-through only. The lane to the left of the ambulance is a left turn lane, and the lane to the right is signed as a straight or right turn lane. The road configuration on Memory Lane is similar, at least in the northbound direction. Left lane for left turn only, center lane straight through, and right lane for straight through or right turn. There are tens of thousands of intersections like this all across the country. As the ambulance approaches, all traffic on Market Street, both eastbound and westbound, confronts a yellow signal briefly, which will, of course, predictably change to red. Responding to the ambulance's lights and sirens, the two vehicles ahead move aside to the right, while the vehicles in the left lane are waiting for their signal to turn. Closer to the intersection, the ambulance driver checks the cross traffic and looks both left and right. The ambulance driver can see that the line of northbound traffic begins to move forward, then the lead car spots the ambulance and stops abruptly within the intersection. With that stop, the ambulance driver starts to move through the intersection as he scans Memory Lane from the left to the right. From out of nowhere, he's struck, broadsided, from the second lane of the northbound traffic. There will be damage. There may be injuries. There may be death. How did this happen? This perspective holds the answer. Northbound lanes, left turn lane, straight only, and right turn and straight. The incident car is traveling in the curb lane. When the light turns green, the traffic ahead starts to move and then begins to slow and then stops without apparent reason. The incident car swings into the center lane and begins to accelerate. After all, the light's green. The driver has no perception that anything is wrong. And yet something is very wrong. There's an ambulance in the path, and another intersection crash will take its toll. But it was all avoidable if only the ambulance driver had obeyed just 3 of the 8 signs of intersection safety. If only the ambulance driver had scanned for possible hazards, had approached each lane as a separate intersection, and had made eye contact, this incident could have been avoided, and the passing through the intersection could have occurred like this instead. If only the ambulance driver had followed the signs of intersection safety, the ambulance could have arrived safely to render the service for which it is committed. Let's move to a second scenario, and we'll have this incident involve a pumper and demonstrate both the limitations of warning devices and how important it is to account for all lanes of traffic. This is the same virtual intersection, but this time our emergency vehicle is traveling in the center lane northbound on Memory Lane. Left lane is left turn only, center lane is straight only, and the curb lane is a straight and right turn lane. As the scenario begins, all the traffic in both directions on Market Street has a green light. There are vehicles on memory lane in both the left turn and center lanes waiting for the light to change, and a vehicle in the curb lane is intending to make a right turn on red. The pumper driver moves towards the curbside lane. The car ahead turns onto Market Street to clear the way for the pumper, who's intending to proceed straight through the intersection. As he gets nearer, the driver of the pumper slows down and can see that all the visible traffic on Market Street has come to a stop. The traffic that he can see has perceived his presence and has yielded, and so he continues through at a reduced rate of speed despite the fact that he cannot account for the traffic on the far side of the tractor-trailer. That becomes the fateful decision, and the outcome is critical. Impact, crash, injury, perhaps death, and the individuals in need of the pumper's service, the individuals who placed the call for help initially, go wanting. Instead of rendering service, the pumper is in need of service, and everyone involved will suffer the consequences. Viewing the incident from the perspective of the privately owned vehicle makes it clear that there was no warning of the impact. If only the pumper driver had obeyed just 2 of the 8 signs of intersection safety. If only the pumper driver hadn't relied on warning devices and had approached each lane as a separate intersection, this incident could have been avoided, and the passing through the intersection could have occurred like this instead. We opened this section of the tape with a reference to the laws of physics and how they cannot be changed. We'd like to return to our virtual setting one final time to take a look at both force and inertia. Let us presume that we're driving a pumper west on Market Street at a relatively modest 25 miles per hour. That means that we're traveling 37.5 feet every second. In the blink of an eye, our pumper will move 37.5 feet down the road. This becomes particularly significant if there's a need to stop suddenly, perhaps for a vehicle that's about to pass through the intersection. Given the weight and force of the pumper, it'll take more than 5 seconds, more than 90 feet to bring the pumper to a safe, complete, and controlled stop. Think of it this way. Traveling at 25 miles per hour, your front bumper effectively extends 90 feet in front of your actual vehicle. If you need to stop in the intersection, you'd better begin applying the brakes more than 90 feet before you get there. And heavier vehicles and greater rates of speed make that extended bumper even longer, make the braking distance even greater. The results can be catastrophic. The laws of physics are unforgiving.
I'm coming down the road and I know that the controlled intersection ahead, be thinking I'm slowing down, getting ready for the intersection stop. Don't run up on that intersection at 40 miles an hour with a 15-ton truck. Is not going to stop.
We've covered a lot of material in this tape, and yet the message is simple. Intersections pose a very serious threat to you, to your organizations, and to the people of the community you serve. You are committed to providing service, committed to saving lives. So, at the very least, do no harm.
We need to get across to the people the magnitude of what could happen here. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of potential there, and we certainly can do things to reduce the potential.
We need to realize that, and realize that when we approach intersections that we're not supreme beings.
Make sure that the vehicles have recognized the fact that there's an emergency vehicle there requesting permission to go through that intersection so that then they can proceed safely.
Intersection safety has to be a high priority for anyone that's involved in emergency services.
It's not worth the risk of hurting people to not fully focus on arriving safely.
The one message I would like everybody to understand is that running through intersections without control of that intersection it kills, it maims, and it's unnecessary. It does not have to happen. It does not have to happen. It does not have to happen.